I'm low key feeling very much like a clown today. Derogatory. So I might do clown makeup. But I also feel like just kind of like sharing what's on my mind because, why the fuck not? That just like having gone through this experience of like whatever the fuck is happening, right? Like this magical spiritual warfare, the gang stalking, and all this other stuff. It has like really shifted the way that I move through the world, where like there's always a part of me that is like very guarded, and it would be unwise not to be guarded. Um, but I think there's like a meeting of like a couple of things, right? One is that like I have like a lot going on in my internal world and a lot of different energies in that world. Um and the only way I think I've been able to like get through this sane is because I have this like capacity to move authentic authentically and strategically at the same time. And I keep seeing this stuff where it's like, oh, I cut her off because when I found out that she was moving strategically when I was being genuine. And I don't think that those two things are oppositional in any way. Um, and it's really hard for me to even explain that because it feels natural. It's just like, I don't know. I just feel like the way that I naturally move is like low key fucked up and weird. And then there's this element too of like, if I get into a triggered space, I just like open up a little bit more. And it's weird to me that like a lot of the times I don't feel comfortable opening up because when I open up, people feel like it's a betrayal or some shit. Like I was hiding something from them the whole time. But in reality, there was never like an invitation to know me on that level. I was already like being kept at a distance from a superficial level, and then like, or I was like asking for things that I needed in order to feel more comfortable, more safe, more acknowledged, to like open up to that next level of vulnerability where you get like more access to me, and it wasn't received, so it just stayed kind of like surface. And I think it's just interesting because it's like this vibe of like, on one hand it's like I feel like I'm not being like supported on like that first fundamental level where I'm like saying things and they're just kind of being dismissed or ignored, right? So why reveal more? But then there's this other energy like maybe if I revealed more from the jump, there would be less hesitation to like give. And it's one of those little mind loops where I could go for centuries just like running those thoughts in a circle. So it's part of the reason why I'm just like saying them so that they're just like out somewhere and I can just have them be done with. But it's like, just being like neurodivergent would be one reason why that's just a common thing. But then it's like neurodivergent and then it's like really like mind-breakingly intense, sophisticated, narcissistic abuse, right? Like, why the fuck would I feel comfortable doing fucking anything in the first place. Like to feel comfortable enough to like come onto social media still, I think is like um, a sign of strength that I give myself a lot of credit for. Um, and I think the reason why it's coming up more is because it's like, all right, so what are these things that like I need to feel safe in connection? And like what anxieties were anxieties which anxieties were I ignoring for the sake of survival that like now that I'm out of survival mode and I'm trying to, like I can exist in a plane of authenticity that feels more comfortable. What anxieties do I now have the opportunity to address and set boundaries around? And it's just weird. Like setting finding intentional community is like it sounds awesome until you realize that it involves the loss of like all these people who are like really fucking cool, but like it's just like a compatibility confusion there. And I don't think someone is inherently a bad person because they can't give me what I need. I just think that like I need to like have the things I need in order to like move forward, right? Um, I think it just gets tricky because there's just certain things like with like rejection sensitivity and stuff where like I go into this triggered space and it's like I'm at the worst stage of my story. And I feel like I have to do all this shit. And I'm watching myself do all this shit and I'm like actively doing all this shit and I'm saying all this shit because like the anxiety is so intense. It's like been built up because it has been suppressed for so long. And I think like the cure for that is to like really just like hold space for myself and the things that make me uncomfortable instead of feeling like I have to be like a superhero and just ignore that for whatever the greater fucking good is. I think it's like shifting the greater good to now like furthering and deepening my sense of internal peace. Whereas before it was more so about like constructing an environment um in which I was like incapable of getting survival, right? So it's like new levels, new devils, and it's like the devil is me, Loki. This is something that I couldn't um, express before. There's also this energy of like having new language to express myself the older I get, and like trying to find greater senses of balance. Um, yeah, just kind of like moving towards a greater amount of like peace and success. But when I tell you that like every day it feels like the mountain of grief over like situations and people that I couldn't bring with me just grows deeper and taller and wider every day. And I really don't know what to do about it except for recognizing there's this big fucking thing in the distance, right? My spirit is happiest at places of demarcation, like mountains, the shore, and stuff like that. So I think there's this acknowledgement of like this growing grief as something that, like, as much as I hate it, I'm just naturally attached to, and it'll just continue to grow. Um, but then I'm like, shouldn't I acknowledge my anxieties around that? Mm, big questions. Good question.